My greedy stepmother is demanding that I hand over my late mother's house because my father told her she could. I, at 31, have a stepmother whom my father married a year after my mother passed away. I felt uncomfortable seeing my father fall in love with another woman so quickly. I never thought much about it until my father and I found out that my mother left nothing to my father in her will. Instead, all her assets and her beach house were in my name. My mother left me a letter, and I ended up reading it and finding out things I wish I had never known. My mother, who was sick at the time, found out that my father was having an affair with another woman. She told me she had suspected it for a long time, since they found out about my mother's cancer, and since then my father had become distant. She said my father constantly asked about her will, and how it reminded her that he would take care of the beach house when she passed away. My mother was shattered and spent her last days with an unfaithful person. When I read the letter, I couldn't help but cry uncontrollably in my room. I wished I had been there for my mother, and the more I cried, the more I felt anger and hatred towards my father and my stepmother. When my father found out he had nothing left, he started losing his temper and yelling, asking why he hadn't been left anything. It was clear that my father only cared about my mother's belongings and not her. I decided to leave my hometown and cut ties with my father and his lover. I decided to move to my mother's beach house, where I would try to start over. I've always worked from home, so moving to another area was never an issue. It wasn't until recently that I received a text message from my stepmother. She asked how I was doing, and I didn't respond. She texted again and was more direct. She told me I needed to move out of the beach house because my father and she were moving in, but if I wanted to stay, I could pay them rent for my room. I looked at the message completely speechless, unsure if she was lying or if she was serious. I told her the house was in my name and that I would call the police if they set foot in my home. She never responded. After that, I thought that was the end, until a couple of weeks later, I received a notification on my phone while shopping that there was movement near my driveway. I opened the app and saw my stepmother and my father getting out of their vehicle as they continued to unpack their belongings. My heart sank, and I immediately felt anger within me. I decided to call the police in advance and told them there were people trespassing on my property. I arrived home, and the police were already talking to my father and stepmother. I approached them and my father looked at me and started shouting. He insulted me and called me a disgrace for calling the police on his own family. My stepmother tried to play the victim with the police, saying they were just visiting me and checking on how I was doing because I was still grieving the loss of my mother. I got angry and started cursing her for mentioning my mother. The police, confused and trying to calm the situation, asked for our versions privately. The officers took my father and stepmother to interrogate them, and during that time, I took a moment to calm down. I was shaking and just thought I could leave in peace, but my father kept ruining it. Then the officer approached me to interrogate me. I provided confirmation of my identity and ownership of the beach house, as well as the text messages my stepmother had sent. One full explanation of why they were trying to take away my property. The officers understood and made it clear they were on my side. One of the officers even seemed disgusted when he heard the whole story. The most incredible thing is that despite trying to tell them to leave and the warnings from the officers, it took them 1 hour until they finally decided to leave my property. I thanked the police and thought they would learn their lesson and leave me alone. But in the following days, they have continued to harass me with constant phone calls, threatening messages, and they even tried to get support from other relatives to pressure me into giving up my house. They kept trying to intimidate me into surrendering, but I won't. I documented everything, every call, text message, and the images of them trying to come to my house. I finally decided to take them to court. During the trial, my lawyer presented multiple pieces of evidence of their harassment. The judge was on my side. In the end, a restraining order was issued against my in-laws, prohibiting any further attempts to contact me or come to my house. Additionally, they were ordered to pay for damages, compensating me for emotional distress. My father and I looked at each other one last time, and his face was filled with disappointment and anger, but I didn't care. I cried tears of happiness afterward, while sitting in my living room. It was finally over, and I was finally at peace. I could finally restart my life. One couple of years later, I ended up getting married.